In today's episode, we're sharing 4 stories of people who were horrifically attacked by dogs. From a young boy mauled by 2 pets to a woman who adopted the wrong dog. But first, we begin in Texas, where a college student walked into a routine job and never walked out. It was December 23, 2021. Just one day before her 22nd birthday, Jacqueline Durand was looking forward to celebrating the holidays with her boyfriend Nathan and her family. The University of Texas at Dallas student had much to be grateful for as the year came to a close. She was excelling in her supply chain management program, her dog-sitting business was thriving, and she and Nathan had recently moved past his cancer battle with a renewed appreciation for life. Jacqueline's love for dogs had been the defining passion of her life since childhood. She often shared stories about her father's golden retriever from her early years, describing how she would stare at the dog in fascination and lie beside it when she was barely a toddler. Though the dog passed away when she was only about 18 months old, Jacqueline maintained that this early connection sparked her lifelong fascination with canines. This passion eventually led her to start her own dog-sitting business while in college. With her warm smile and gentle demeanor, Jacqueline quickly built a reputation as a reliable and caring dog sitter in her community. She had a natural way with animals that seemed almost magical to those who witnessed it. Even the most anxious or difficult dogs would calm in her presence. She frequently expressed her belief that dogs could sense good people and recognize genuine affection. When not studying or caring for her clients' pets, Jacqueline enjoyed hiking with Nathan and volunteering at local animal shelters. She dreamed of one day becoming a therapy dog trainer after graduation, hoping to help people experiencing trauma or illness to find comfort through the healing presence of dogs. The irony of this dream would not be lost on those who knew her story. Jacqueline's relationship with Nathan had deepened during his cancer treatment. Their shared experience of facing mortality at such a young age had given them both a perspective on life that few of their peers could understand. They had recently begun discussing marriage, planning a future together that would combine their shared love of animals and desire to help others. On that December evening, Jacqueline was scheduled to begin a dog-sitting job for Dr. Justin Bishop and his wife Ashley in Coppell, Texas. The couple owned 3 dogs, including Lucy, a German Shepherd mix weighing about 65 pounds, and Bender, a pit bull mix weighing approximately 90 pounds. Following her professional protocol, Jacqueline had previously met the dogs during a required meet and greet session. She later described how the dogs had appeared completely friendly during this initial meeting, noting that they had calmly sat on the couch while she spoke with their owner, showing no concerning behaviors whatsoever. What she didn't notice during that initial visit was the ominous sign on the Bishop's front door that read, "Crazy dogs, please don't knock or ring the bell. Call or text instead." This silent warning suggested the owners were well aware of their pet's dangerous tendencies. The Bishops had been desperately seeking a dog sitter for the Christmas holidays, posting in a local Facebook group about their first family Christmas vacation in nearly 2 decades. They had texted Jacqueline earlier that day, informing her that, contrary to their usual practice, they had left the dogs outside their kennels. This seemingly minor detail would prove catastrophic. As Jacqueline approached the house that evening, she had no inkling of the horror that awaited her. She had texted Nathan that she would call him after getting the dogs settled, planning to finalize their birthday dinner plans for the following evening. With her usual confidence around animals, she unlocked the front door of the Bishop's home. The moment the door swung open, chaos erupted. Lucy and Bender charged at Jacqueline with unexpected savagery, their eyes wild with aggression. Within seconds, they knocked her to the ground with such force that her phone, keys, and purse scattered across the floor. The dogs' attack was merciless as they dragged her from the front foyer into the living room, their powerful jaws tearing at her flesh. Later, Jacqueline would describe the horrifying sensation of feeling her skin hanging from her face and believing she was going to die. The bloodthirsty animals ripped at her with such violence that they tore off all her clothing, including her blue jeans. Their jaws clamped down on her face, tearing away her ears, nose, lips, and most of her facial features below her eyes. Over 800 bites covered her body as she drifted in and out of consciousness on the living room floor, her blood soaking into the carpet beneath her. As the attack continued, Jacqueline's thoughts turned to her loved ones. She would later describe losing all hope of survival as she lay on the rug. Her most painful thought being that she wouldn't see her family again and hadn't had the chance to tell them that she loved them. The pain was excruciating, but eventually her body began to shut down as shock set in. The only reason help arrived was due to sheer luck. When the dogs dragged Jacqueline into the house, the front door remained open, triggering the home's security system. The alarm company notified the Bishops, who asked a neighbor to check on their house. When the neighbor approached, one of the dogs rushed out and bit her as well, though her injuries were minor compared to Jacqueline's. The neighbor's husband immediately dialed 911. When police arrived at the scene, they faced a horrifying dilemma captured on body cam footage. They could see Jacqueline through the doorway, but the aggressive dogs prevented them from entering. One officer can be heard on the footage explaining that they couldn't enter because of the dogs. The officers stood helplessly outside, knowing a young woman was being mauled to death just feet away. It took an agonizing 37 minutes from the time officers arrived until paramedics could safely enter the home. By then, Jacqueline had lost 30% of the blood in her body. When emergency responders finally reached her, they found her clinging to life, her body mutilated beyond recognition. Jacqueline later recalled seeing emergency lights reflecting on the wall as she lay there. She described how she consciously slowed her breathing to conserve oxygen and heard commotion outside, realizing that rescue was imminent. Rushed to a level 1 trauma center, Jacqueline was immediately placed in a medically induced coma. During surgery, doctors had to resuscitate her 4 times as they fought to save her life. She remained in the coma for over a week, unaware that she had survived the brutal attack. When she finally awoke in January 2022, Jacqueline faced the devastating reality of her injuries. Her face had been catastrophically disfigured. Her ears, nose, and lips were gone. Her cheeks had been torn away, and she had hundreds of puncture wounds across her body. Despite the unimaginable trauma, Jacqueline's spirit remained unbroken. Over the following months, she underwent 18 surgeries to reconstruct her face. Throughout her recovery, her boyfriend Nathan never left her side. When she expressed concerns about her changed appearance, Nathan reassured her of his unwavering commitment. The dogs that attacked Jacqueline were later euthanized, and she filed a lawsuit against the Bishops for negligence. The lawsuit alleged that the couple knew their dogs were dangerous but failed to properly secure them or warn Jacqueline of the true extent of the risk. Jacqueline endured the unthinkable and lived, but not everyone gets that chance. In another state on an ordinary morning, a 6-year-old boy opened the wrong door, and what was waiting for him was faster, fiercer, and far less forgiving. It was December 5th, 2023. The winter chill had settled over Portland, Oregon as the holiday season approached. For 6-year-old Loyalty Charles Scott, affectionately known as Mookie to his family, it was just another school day. The first grader at Glenfair Elementary had no idea that this ordinary Tuesday morning would be his last. Loyalty was being raised by his grandmother, Rena Scott, the steady heart of a bustling household. She had taken on the responsibility of raising several of her grandchildren, including Loyalty, and she did so with unwavering love. Her days revolved around them: school drop-offs, warm dinners, clean clothes, and constant affection. Loyalty was her shadow, her joy, and her reason for pushing forward. Everyone who knew Loyalty spoke of the same thing: his radiant presence. Even at 6 years old, he carried a warmth that seemed to disarm the world around him. He smiled constantly, shared freely, and brought light into any room he entered. Teachers noticed how he offered help without being asked, looked out for classmates who felt left out, and made sure no one ever played alone during recess. He had the kind of heart that left a mark. Each weekday morning followed a familiar routine. Rena would drive him to the home of her longtime friend Coco Miller, who then took him the rest of the way to school. Coco had known the family for years. She was a trusted figure in their lives, someone Rena believed would care for Loyalty like her own. But there was something the Scott family hadn't fully grasped, something dangerous hidden behind Coco's front door. Coco presented herself as the head of a dog training and protection business, calling it Canine Protection. Her online persona showed a flair for theatrics, posing with weapons, adopting an aggressive brand. But behind that facade, the real threat lived in her garage. Two massive, unregistered Mastiff-type dogs, each weighing over 100 pounds and bred specifically for aggression and territorial defense. To her credit, Coco had always kept Loyalty separated from the animals. She understood they weren't family pets. They were trained to respond to perceived threats, and she never intended for him to come near them. But no amount of caution could erase a child's curiosity or predict the split-second decisions of a 6-year-old. That morning, like so many other, Rena dropped Loyalty off at Coco's home. He was bundled in his jacket, backpack slung over his shoulder, ready for school and unaware of the danger that lay just beyond a door. Inside the house, everything was normal. Coco prepared for the day, leaving Loyalty inside while she stepped into the garage to check on the dogs. What happened next unfolded in seconds. Perhaps Loyalty thought it was time to leave, or maybe he just wanted to peek inside. Whatever the reason, he opened the door to the garage, and that single motion unraveled everything. The larger of the two dogs saw movement and instantly went on the attack. In an explosion of muscle and instinct, it lunged at the boy, slamming him backward onto the cold concrete. Loyalty screamed. The dog clamped down on his arm, crushing bone and ripping flesh. The second dog, aroused by the chaos, joined in, blocking the only escape. Coco turned at the sound and raced toward the boy, yelling for the dogs to stop. But her voice held no weight against the frenzy now consuming the animals. The first dog released Loyalty's arm only to latch onto his small torso. The second grabbed his leg. Together, they pulled in opposite directions, tearing the child's body with terrifying force. Desperate, Coco threw herself into the melee, grabbing at collars, striking with her fists, anything to break the grip. When that failed, she reached for a bat from a nearby shelf and swung it across one dog's back. It barely reacted. Their focus was absolute. Loyalty's body grew limp beneath them. His screams weakened to whimpers and then fell silent. Blood pooled beneath him. In a final, frantic attempt to save him, Coco threw herself over his body, shielding him with her own and trying to reach a handgun she kept nearby. She managed to grab it, but by the time she looked down, the damage had already been done. Loyalty's chest no longer moved. His eyes were fixed and empty. The realization shattered her. The gun slipped from her hand. The dogs, now quiet, slowly backed away, their mouths stained in red. When emergency responders arrived just after 7:30 a.m., they found Coco on the floor, cradling Loyalty's broken body in her arms. He was pronounced dead at the scene. There was nothing they could do. The attack sent shockwaves through the community. At Glenfair Elementary, teachers wept. Counselors struggled to find words for his classmates. Loyalty had been the kind of child who brought joy without trying. His loss left a silence that no one could fill. His grandmother, who had poured her heart into raising him, was devastated beyond words. Friends and family described her as crushed, unable to comprehend how a trusted routine had ended in tragedy. Authorities removed the dogs and euthanized them days later. Months after the attack, Coco Miller was indicted on multiple felony charges, including criminally neglect homicide and first-degree mistreatment. The investigation revealed just how preventable the incident had been. Unregistered dogs, unprotected access, and a child placed too close to a threat that never should have existed. Loyalty Charles Scott's story is a devastating reminder of how quickly life can change. and how irreversible the consequences of one misjudged risk can be. While his family grieved the loss of a boy taken far too soon, in another corner of the country, a different kind of tragedy was quietly unfolding. A man had just arrived at an abandoned property for work, and the predators he was about to meet had been waiting for months. It was June 15, 2023. The summer heat had settled over eastern Tennessee, creating a thick blanket of humidity. For 34-year-old Nolan Reeves, it was just another day as a real estate photographer. The assignment seemed routine: photograph a foreclosed rural property in Hawkins County. Nolan had built a solid reputation in real estate photography. His eye for detail had earned him steady clients. A former architecture student who had dropped out due to mounting student loans, Nolan had found his niche capturing buildings rather than designing them. His portfolio showcased everything from luxury penthouses to humble starter homes, each photographed with meticulous attention to light, angle, and composition. Born and raised in Knoxville, Nolan had always been creative and technically minded. His friends described him as methodical yet artistic, someone who could see beauty in structures others overlooked. He had recently become engaged to Emma, his girlfriend of 5 years, and they were planning an October wedding. That morning over breakfast, they had been discussing wedding details before he headed out for what should have been a routine job. The 5-acre property on Meadowbrook Lane had been vacant for 8 months, since the Harmon family's eviction. What neither Nolan nor the listing agent knew was that when the Harmons left, they had made a fateful decision that would cost Nolan his life. The Harmons had owned 4 Cane Corso Presa Canario mixed-breed dogs, massive animals weighing between 100 and 130 pounds with bone-crushing jaws. Unable to find housing that would accept such large dogs, the Harmons had simply abandoned them on the property. For 8 months, the dogs had survived by hunting wildlife. The tall privacy fence had kept them contained, while the remote location meant their barking went unnoticed. In isolation, the once domesticated animals had reverted to a feral pack mentality. Noah arrived at the property just after 2 p.m. The listing agent had texted him the gate code and apologized for not meeting him in person, explaining that the property had been vacant for months and should be straightforward to photograph. As he pulled up to the house, Nolan felt an unusual sense of unease. The property seemed too quiet, too still. He dismissed the feeling as he unloaded his equipment, though he did notice several unusual details. Deep scratches on the garage door, what appeared to be animal tracks in the mud near the porch, and strangely, a deer leg bone picked clean near the edge of the yard. These warning signs registered briefly in his mind, but were quickly forgotten as he focused on his work. While setting up his first exterior shots, Nolan heard rustling in the tall grass, but assumed it was just the wind. Had he looked more carefully, he might have seen the dark shapes moving stealthily through the overgrown landscape, tracking his movements with predatory focus. The dogs had been watching him since he first drove through the gate, assessing this intruder on their territory. Nolan began with exterior shots, methodically working his way around the property. As he moved farther from his vehicle, the dogs silently closed the distance between them. Their hunting strategy, perfected over months of taking down deer and other wildlife, was to surround their prey before attacking as a coordinated unit. Nolan had just set up his tripod when he heard a low growl behind him. He turned to see 4 massive dogs approaching in a semicircle, heads low, teeth bared. He began slowly backing toward his SUV, trying to keep his voice calm. The largest dog, a dark brindle male with a scarred face, led the advance. The others, a black female with cropped ears, a fawn-colored male with a massive chest, and a smaller brindle female, flanked him in perfect formation. When Nolan was halfway to his vehicle, he made a critical mistake. He turned his back and ran. The sudden movement triggered the pack's predatory instinct. The largest dog, later identified as Brutus, charged with terrifying speed, sinking his teeth into Nolan's right calf. The impact sent him sprawling across the overgrown lawn, his camera equipment scattering. The initial bite tore through denim and flesh with ease, severing tendons and crushing bone. Nolan's scream echoed across the empty property as the other 3 dogs quickly joined the attack. The black female seized his left arm, clamping down with enough force to fracture his humerus. The fawn male grabbed his shoulder, while the smaller brindle circled, darting in to bite at his torso and legs whenever an opening appeared. Blood soaked through his clothes as the dog's powerful jaws inflicted devastating damage with each bite. They worked with the efficiency of experienced predators, taking turns to rest while others maintained their grip. When Nolan tried to protect his throat, the dogs targeted his exposed limbs, shaking their heads violently to tear flesh and disable their prey. Nolan screamed for help, though he knew no one could hear him in this remote location. Each time he attempted to rise, the dogs would drag him back down. The attack continued for nearly 15 minutes, the dogs relentless in their savagery. They had learned to be patient hunters, wearing down larger prey through sustained attack rather than going immediately for the kill. The pain was beyond anything Nolan had ever experienced. Sharp, paralyzing jolts with each new bite. His world began to narrow, consciousness fading as blood loss took its toll. In a moment of clarity, he remembered his phone. With his right arm partially free as the dogs repositioned, Nolan somehow reached the phone in his pocket. His blood-slicked fingers managed to dial 911, though he could barely speak when the dispatcher answered. As Brutus released his leg only to lunge for his throat, Nolan used his last strength to whisper his location to the dispatcher. Brutus's final bite ended the attack. Nolan was unresponsive when deputies reached the property, his phone still connected to the emergency line. The investigation revealed the dogs had been living wild on the property. Authorities traced them to the Harmon family, who admitted abandoning them, assuming someone else would eventually deal with the animals. The sheriff's department concluded the attack was preventable. A basic property inspection would likely have revealed the danger. The 4 dogs were later euthanized and the Harmon family faced criminal charges. For Emma, Nolan's fiancé, and his parents, no legal outcome could undo the loss or the warning his death left behind. When dogs are abandoned and left unchecked, instinct can turn deadly. But not all tragedies begin outside. In another part of the country, a woman brought a rescue dog into her home, unaware she was inheriting someone else's silence and something far more unpredictable. It was January 15, 2023. The Vermont winter had blanketed the countryside in pristine white snow, transforming Sarah Lawson's 5-acre property into a picturesque scene from a holiday card. For the 38-year-old social worker, the isolated farmhouse represented a fresh start after her divorce 2 years prior. Living alone had its challenges, but Sarah had always been independent and resilient, traits that served her well both in her personal life and in her demanding career helping children in the foster care system. Sarah's farmhouse sat at the edge of a long, winding driveway nearly a mile from her nearest neighbor. She had chosen this property specifically for its privacy and the surrounding natural beauty. The isolation rarely bothered her, except during the harshest winter storms when the power lines went down and the roads became impassable. 6 months earlier, Sarah had decided her home needed one more addition to be complete: a dog. After researching local rescues, she visited Second Chance Animal Shelter, where she first met Max, a 4-year-old Rottweiler Shepherd mix with soulful brown eyes and a gentle demeanor. The shelter staff explained that Max had been surrendered when his previous owner relocated for work. They described him as well-trained and protective without being aggressive, the perfect companion for a woman living alone. What they didn't tell Sarah was that Max had been removed from his previous home by animal control after severely biting a delivery driver. The shelter had made the ethically questionable decision to omit this information, fearing that Max would be euthanized if his history became known. For 6 months, Max proved to be everything Sarah had hoped for. His protective nature made her feel secure in her isolated home, and his affectionate personality provided the companionship she had been missing. Sarah often told friends that adopting Max was the best decision she had made since her divorce. What Sarah couldn't have known was that Max suffered from a rare neurological condition that caused unpredictable episodes of aggression. These episodes were triggered by specific stimuli, particularly high-pitched mechanical sounds, and resulted in temporary but complete personality changes. His previous owner had witnessed 2 such episodes, the second of which resulted in the attack on the delivery driver. The first warning signs appeared in December. Sarah noticed that Max became unusually agitated when she used her blender to make morning smoothies. He would pace anxiously, his ears flattened against his head until the noise stopped. She made a mental note to avoid using the blender when Max was in the kitchen, attributing his reaction to sensitive hearing rather than anything concerning. On January 15th, a severe winter storm had knocked out power and cell service across the region. As evening approached and the snowfall intensified, Sarah decided to prepare a simple dinner using the camping stove she kept for emergencies. Max lay contentedly on his bed in the corner of the kitchen, watching her movements with his usual attentiveness. After dinner, Sarah remembered the frozen berries in her freezer that would spoil if the power remained out overnight. She decided to use her hand-cranked blender to make a berry dessert. As she began turning the crank, the blender emitted a high-pitched whirring sound that echoed through the quiet home. Max's reaction was immediate and alarming. The 95-pound dog leapt to his feet, his body rigid and his eyes suddenly vacant. When she took a step toward him, he growled, a deep, threatening sound she had never heard from him before. Sarah froze, her heart racing as she realized the situation was rapidly deteriorating. In the dim light of her battery-powered lantern, Sarah could see that Max was no longer the gentle companion she knew. His hackles were raised, his lips pulled back to reveal gleaming teeth, and his eyes had no recognition of her. When she slowly backed toward the doorway, Max lunged forward with explosive force, knocking her to the hardwood floor. His powerful jaws clamped down on her forearm as she raised it instinctively to protect her face. The pain was immediate and overwhelming as Max's teeth crushed through muscle and scraped against bone. When she managed to pull her arm free, leaving skin and tissue in his jaws, Max immediately redirected his attack to her throat. She barely managed to get her knee up between them, giving her precious inches of protection as his teeth snapped centimeters from her jugular. With adrenaline surging through her body, Sarah remembered the heavy cast iron pans still sitting on the camping stove. She reached out, her fingers stretching until they grasped the hot handle. Ignoring the searing pain of the burn, she swung the pan with all her strength, connecting with the side of Max's head. The impact momentarily stunned him, allowing Sarah to scramble away and slam the kitchen door shut, trapping the dog inside. Bleeding profusely from her mangled arm and several puncture wounds on her shoulder and neck, Sarah stumbled through the darkened house to her front door. With no cell service and no close neighbors, Sarah faced an impossible choice: remain in the house with an aggressive dog separated only by a hollow interior door, or attempt to reach help through the blizzard. She chose to brave the storm, wrapping her bleeding arm in a kitchen towel and pulling on her coat with her good arm. The moment she stepped outside, the bitter cold and howling wind nearly knocked her off her feet. Sarah pushed forward, each step a struggle through knee-deep snow. The blood loss was making her dizzy, and the freezing temperature quickly numbed her extremities. She had managed to travel only a quarter-mile down her driveway when her strength finally gave out. Sarah collapsed into the snow, her body no longer able to fight both the severe injuries and the extreme cold. 3 days later, when the roads were finally cleared enough for Sarah's colleague to check on her after she failed to report for work, authorities found a grim scene. Sarah's frozen body was discovered halfway down her driveway, a trail of blood marking her desperate journey through the snow. Inside the house, Max was found still confined to the kitchen, showing no signs of the aggression that had cost his owner her life. The injuries on Sarah's body were consistent with a canine attack. Deep puncture wounds, torn muscle tissue, and defensive marks on her arms. Investigators found blood smears and tufts of fur near the kitchen, along with a dented cast iron pan on the floor. Max's muzzle tested positive for Sarah's DNA, confirming he had bitten her before she fled the house. Subsequent investigation revealed the shelter's deception about Max's history and the uncovered medical records documenting his neurological condition. The case prompted new legislation in Vermont requiring full disclosure of animal bite histories in shelter adoptions. Max was humanely euthanized after examination confirmed an inoperable brain tumor that had likely caused his episodes of aggression. Thanks for watching. If these stories shocked you, there's another jaw-dropping episode waiting for you on your end screen right now.